Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on my channel, that one Andrew. Think of this as I think I'm going to title this like a gaming block plus special discussion. Um, and I know it's like, oh, you're just jumping on the bandwagon. Everyone's talking about the Switch too, which no, it's not because I'm jumping on the bandwagon. I have a history of talking about video games on here for the last 10 years. So that's kind of what this is. The podcast is the podcast. It's never really been consistent, but it will come back one day, I'm sure. And even recently, me and some of the co-hosts, we did watch the Nintendo Direct reveal together. But the reason that wasn't even a podcast is because one of them was literally at work while we were watching it. And they kind of had Discord on the side open so they could talk to us a little bit while they were doing their work. So, being an adult, it is what it is. Having full-time jobs, it's hard to get together and have a consistent podcast once, even twice, when we thought about doing 2 times a week. It's hard. But I did want to share my thoughts about the Switch 2, give a what I thought was a funny comparison. Um, and yeah, just kind of talk about the things. So the first thing that everyone has on their mind right now, and everyone's shouting from the rooftop, is the price. Oh, the price, the price, the price. $450, $500 for the bundle, maybe more because of tariffs. $80 games for some games, $70 for others. Uh, that's what everyone's talking about. And honestly, it's not something that I really care about. Now, $80 games, I don't prefer those. Um, I've never had a real problem with the $70 games, though. You can see previous podcast episodes where I've talked about that, and I've kind of defended that, especially having some discussions with Jake, where he is not a believer of the $70 game, which he's entitled to, because I think when it comes to pricing of games and really any consumer thing, it's worth what you make it. So if a game is worth $200 to me, then it is worth $200. But if it's not worth $200 for most people, then it's not for them. And the market will decide that too, of course. Nintendo's not dumb. They know that putting that sticker tag out is going to cause outrage and definitely shock. But they also know that there are millions of people that will be okay with spending that $80, just like there were tens of millions of people that were okay with buying Tears of the Kingdom at $70. So it's one of those things of like, yes, it sucks. Um, it's not the best practice. I really, really hate those people that keep bringing up, well, games used to be $80, $90, $100 back on the Nintendo 64 and the Super Nintendo and even the NES and things like that. It's just super irritating because it comes off as like very fanboyish, and that is not what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to say, oh, they used to be expensive back then, so you should be okay with it now. What I am saying is that this is Nintendo testing the waters, seeing will people buy them at 80. Will buy our games at $80. And just a quick note on those older games being more expensive. It is very well known information, very well known, that a lot of those prices that were higher were based off the size of the chip in the game, um, or the memory in the game. That's why you tended to see a lot of JRPGs be more expensive, because they were inherently bigger, and the actual cartridge itself cost more money to make. That's why they had to charge $80, $90. The Nintendo Switch cartridge, I promise you, does not cost that much more to make. Cyberpunk to Mario Kart to whatever, the cartridge prices are going to be relatively the same. I just bought, and I know it's not the same, but I just bought a $500 Ultra SDXC, or not $500, my bad, 512 gigabyte memory card. 500, half a terabyte, costs like $20. So we should really be a little more educated. Also, a lot of people who are sharing those prices, they don't have sources. They just have an image that they found. So those prices could be British, they could be Canadian, they could be Australian, they could be fake. And we're in a completely different period. If you have to bring up things that happened 30 years ago to defend your point of view, it's probably not a good point of view. Um, so I just wanted to say that. Now, as far as the console itself, Um, and actually, I think I did this with the Switch. I might have the Direct playing, and I know that I'll like demonetize this video. I don't get paid for this. This channel's never been monetized. Probably never will be. It's definitely just a hobby. But you know, the 300 and something of you subscribed. Shout out to you guys. Appreciate you guys. Um, so I probably had that playing. But the thing that I'm hesitant about being like, yes, Switch 2, nailed it, amazing, it's great. All the features that they announced were features that should have been on the Switch 1 and have been industry standards for 15 plus years. And I know I'm not saying anything new, but to congratulate, and this happens every single Nintendo console launch. Their hardcore of hardcore fans congratulate Nintendo. Say, amazing job. This is the best thing ever for doing things that other consoles have done 15 years ago. I was thinking about, and I couldn't, it just would have taken too much effort for whatever it was. Um, but I was thinking about like comparing the PlayStation 3 Ultra Slim to the Switch 2. Ultra Slim launched at $300. And by the way, I'm not going to do that whole adjusted for inflation thing because that's not how economics works. That's not how pricing works. Pricing doesn't say this was $20 20 years ago. Oh, inflation has gone up, so now that $20 has to be $35. That's not how the economy works. That's not how pricing works. If it was, your grocery bill would actually be an enormous amount more today than it was 30 years ago. Not just your gamings, your gamings, your game consoles or your game video games or whatever. That's not how pricing works at all. Um, so we're just gonna set that aside for a second. The whole like, well, $300 PlayStation 3 would be $600 today. No, the only reason the PS5 was $500 was because it was released during COVID. Just like the only reason the Switch 2 is about to be more than $450 is because it's getting released during whatever the hell is going on right now. Excuse my language. Anyways, going back to it. PlayStation 3, Ultra Slim, and I get it. Iterative console, whatever. Just hear me out. Came out in 2012, so a little over 10 years ago. Released with 500 gigabytes of memory. The Switch 2 is releasing with 256. So the PS3 Ultra Slim has that beat. And that was a big, big complaint about the original Switch. I should have my notes right here. 32 gigabytes of storage. That was unacceptable in 2017. And that was a huge, huge point of contention with people. SD cards were sold out everywhere because it's like, this is not enough. It launched with Breath of the Wild. Half the storage console was full from that one game. So I'm not going to congratulate Nintendo on giving us an okay amount now. Because 250 gigs, Cyberpunk's got to be at least 50, 60 gigabytes. It's on the low end still. It's at least doable. But the 32 gigabytes on launch of the Switch was unacceptable. But they got away with it because they're Nintendo. PS3, 500 gigs. And this is for the $300 version. The PS3 Ultra Slim did launch with a 256 gigabyte version. I think it was $50 less. And these were both bundled with games. The one I could find looking up old articles, it came with Assassin's Creed 2. Great game, by the way. Another core feature of the Switch 2 is game chat. I shouldn't have to explain why this isn't something to celebrate. This isn't something to be like, yeah, Nintendo did it. They nailed it. Got game chat in our console now. The Xbox 360. No, the Xbox launched with game chat. I shouldn't say launched. I was like 6. I couldn't tell you. But I know for a shadow of a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, Xbox Live, Xbox Game Chat. You want to argue? Well, it's a handheld. PlayStation Vita had game chat integrated, built in. And yes, I am going to bring up the Vita a couple times because I get it. The Vita was too early. The Vita walked so the Switch could sprint. But it just goes to the whole like why I think people could be justified in not being excited for the Switch 2 or justified being like, okay, yeah, it is what it is. kind of combating all the hype and the like. I mean, it's hard to say fanboys because not all of them are fanboys, but a lot of them are. Um, but I'm not going to say, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing! It has built-in game chat." And the whole webcam integration too. We did our Connect, and I get it's not the same thing, but the PlayStation Eye was a thing. Actually, every PlayStation console since the PS2 has had a camera that could connect. Every Xbox console since the 360 has had a camera that can connect. This isn't something to be like, oh, you can plug in a camera now. The Switch 2 is amazing. Look at that. Congrats, Nintendo. You've caught up to the last 20 years on that end. Um, Another thing I see people kind of, not as loudly, but kind of um, celebrating is that as a fan in the dock now, the Nintendo dock is it it it's it's kind of pointless, especially for the price they're selling it at. $110, I think, was the last time I saw an official price, and it was like 105, 110. I know it was over $100. Um, and hear me out. Like, I'll show you right now. I have my OLED Switch right here. I have my Switch Lite right here. I was playing this today. Play Animal Crossing on it. So I feel like I am someone who can have a lot of these comments. I have two docks. I bought an extra dock for the Switch. I have actually like almost every accessory for the Switch that you could think of. Um, and it's one of those things of like I am a video game. I don't know what a good word for it. Not saying a gamer, an enthusiast. I'm a video game enthusiast. Uh, I mean, you can kind of tell by the shelves and things like that. I don't necessarily care if the product is worth it or not worth it. I just kind of care about the industry and experiencing things. Not everything. I don't have a Nuya, and I'll never get a Nuya. But I wanted to point that out, being like, I've backed up these comments. Like, I put my money where my mouth is. I can say the Switch dock is pathetic because I've bought two of them, kind of three, because I bought the OLED, and so I bought the original Switch, and then I upgraded to the OLED Switch, and then I got the spare dock. And then my wife has a Switch too, so we've experienced 3 or 4 docks inside this house, and they just transfer to the TV. That's all they do. And that kind of like promise, or not even a promise, because Nintendo's never said it, but that dream of having that extra boost of power inside the dock. I think even with this new dock, there's not really, it's more of an overclocking on the Switch itself instead of actual computing power inside the dock. I might be wrong about that, but from everything I've seen, that's what's happening. Is it's just the Switch itself. It's not really much going on inside the dock. But there's a fan in there now, which is great. I don't know if people might remember, and it makes me feel so old because I'm like, the Switch just came out, but it didn't. It's 8 years old, which means there are 20-year-olds talking about the Switch who were 12 when it launched, and that's kind of crazy. Um, I was 20 when the Switch launched, so I was at least an adult. Um, and I can be like, oh, I remember, because I remember I was there. But the Switch did have some overheating problems, especially when it would get in the dock. There were many times, depending on which game you were playing, that the Switch would die in the dock, depending on how much power it was trying to process for a game. Um, so the dock's not great. And this new dock seems like it's kind of the same thing. And it probably is also, I want to just throw this out there, that it probably is the fact that I got the OLED. It's kind of like what I felt jumping from the PS4 Pro to the PS5. When you get these iterative consoles, you're getting that half step up. So when Nintendo is bragging about the screen size being so much bigger, well, yeah, compared to the original Switch, it is so much bigger. But compared to the OLED Switch, it's still bigger, but it's less than an inch bigger, um, which is still cool, but that is what it is. Same with some of the dock features, mostly like how it's shaped and things like that. but even like having the Ethernet port inside there now, stuff like that. To a lot of people, they're like, yes, that's amazing, finally. To me, who's had an OLED Switch for the last few years, I'm like, I have this. And there might be reasons or justifications like, well, that was supposed to be a Switch Pro, but then because of COVID, they didn't do that and they just made it OLED and things like that. I get it, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day because at the end of the day, they're selling a product. Regardless of their intentions, regardless of the variables that changed what may or may not have happened, regardless of any of that, at the end of the day, they sold a product that they had for a set amount of money. I don't remember how much the OLED was. I know it was not cheap. I think it was more than $300. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like, okay, you're not really selling me on this. And getting to the screen now, I will say the Switch 2 screen does seem comparable to an OLED. I have an OLED TV. I have the OLED Switch. I have many OLED Vitas. I I get it. I'm not a huge like it has to be OLED person. When the Steam Deck came out with their OLED version, I know the battery's better and computing power and things like that. But even then I was like, I'm good. It's fine. When you're talking about screens this small, this you know, they're not really big. The less OLED starts to really matter. I'm not saying it doesn't matter at all, because you can tell a big difference between the OLED Switch and the original Switch, or even the PlayStation Vita 1000 series and the PlayStation Vita 2000 series. But it's not as big of a jump backwards. It's not even backwards. It's just kind of pivoting the screen, changing it from OLED to something else like LCD. It's just a different experience. And I think some people get a little too caught up in the whole it needs to be OLED thing. Um, I don't think it needs to be OLED. And also OLED cause burn-in, which I know that a lot of companies have been trying to fix that. I mean, I'm on an OLED screen actually right now on my computer, and it's something that I think about. But that we have techniques now, and we have systems in place to where burn-in is a lot less common than it used to be. But regardless, I think the screen is not a point of like, oh, it's not worth the money because it's not OLED. It doesn't have to be OLED for it to be worth the money. What it has to be is good. And it seems like everything from those hands-on experiences and kind of technical breakdowns say that, yeah, the screen is really good. Same with the computing power, kind of. The Switch one, when it came out, and it's something I have hundreds of hours on the Switch, and maybe that's saying it doesn't matter, but also I'm not normal. um, but the Switch has also sold over 100 million units, so to a lot of people it doesn't matter. But since day one of the Switch, I have hated how Nintendo cheaped out on the internals of the Switch, and specifically with their flagship launch game, Zelda. That game cannot hold a consistent frame rate. And it's not just Zelda. There are many, many games. There's a reason why, even to this day, the Switch has terrible third party support. Terrible. And now, it's not as bad as like the GameCube or the Wii U. Like those, or the N64. Those were god awful third party support. But the Switch, really only because it sold so well, had those miracle ports. Thinking of like The Witcher 3, or they put Skyrim on there, or they put like LA Noire and just kind of Doom. These cool BioShock, Borderlands, those games on there. Games that were already old when the Switch got their ports. I think there was no game that was at least over a year after release that got put on there. That was a weird way of saying that, but what I mean is like Doom came out in 2016. The Switch port didn't come out till at least 2017. I think I'm remembering that right. And that's because they had to literally remake the game because the Switch, it's, well, actually, I'm not even going to speak on things that I don't know, but I will say it's underpowered. Even by mobile standards, it's very underpowered. Even in 2017 standards, it was underpowered. Um, So the Switch 2 being 10 times more powerful, as the reports have been saying, it's not surprising because in 2017 the Switch already wasn't the cutting edge technology of 2017. It was like 2014 technology in there. So yeah, 10 years of tech. I would hope there's at least 10 times the power, if not 20 times the power, which that's not happening. But um, we'll just have to wait and see. We're already seeing things like, oh, they got Cyberpunk on there running at 30 frames a second, which to some people, they're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. To me, I'm like, Cyberpunk is a 5-year old game. And yes, it's Cyberpunk, but it is a last gen game. We're doing the same thing again. We're showing you these older games that are having to be rebuilt 4, 3, 4, 5 years later. Now we'll put it on the Switch 2. And that's great for the people that want to experience on the go, especially a game like Cyberpunk, any RPG on the go. I get it. Like, yeah, that's great. It's fun. Um, pick up and play whenever you want. That's kind of what the idea of the Steam Deck was to me, but the Steam Deck's just a little too big and clunky for me. Um, so I don't really do it as much, but definitely bringing it up again. Definitely the Vita, that was huge having those massive I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. News is popping up down there, and I was like, something about a car chase. But having those big RPGs on there, Persona 4 Golden, of course. But there's so many other ones that were ported onto the Vita, or just released on the Vita, and that's what makes mobile gaming kind of really attractive to a lot of people, is that you can play those bigger games. It's either bigger games or pick up and go games. There's really no in between. Like, people weren't playing on the 3DS or the Vita for like Assassin's Creed 2 or Call of Duty 4. uh, I'm just trying to think of like some 10-hour experiences, 8-hour experiences, or something like that. um, yeah, so kind of lost my train of thought there, but I was talking about power. That's right. It being more powerful, that's to be expected. That's something I'm not going to celebrate for the Switch 2. That's something that I'm going to say, well, duh. And that's kind of what I was getting at. There was no, and I don't even think it has to be a gimmick, because when the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, to a little lesser extent, but it's still there for sure. They just didn't advertise it as much. When they revealed their new consoles and were showing things off, and we had the Mark Cerny Power Hour, and they're talking about how the technology can change games with the SSD, and with the way that games are designed. They don't have to implement loading screens in there. They don't have to design levels for loading screens. We don't have to walk up in Final Fantasy VII Remake or Rebirth and hold triangle at every door, which is a secret loading screen. Now, Rebirth still has a couple of those for some reason, maybe because it's just so big. But they're definitely a lot less frequent, and they're few and far between. Um, if you're wondering what I'm looking over here too, I just keep making sure that OBS isn't crashing, because it crashed once, and that's where it is. So the camera's right there, OBS is right there. That's why I keep looking over if you're looking at the stream. Um, but that was exciting because it's like, oh, games will fundamentally be changed. And if you've been playing games this generation, I know the big meme is there are no games. And honestly, I think that's just people just bullshitting. Excuse my French. Um, but they're just talking out the bottoms online. They're being like, oh, there's no games released. There's nothing good. Everything's bad now. It's like, you're obviously not playing games. You're obviously not checking things out. Or you have biases already. You're like, that's bad. Oh, I'm not playing that. That's garbage. That's made by EA. Trash. That's Ubisoft. Trash. Same game. It's like, okay. I mean, I don't know what you're looking for then. Xbox has been putting out amazing games. PlayStation has been putting out amazing games. Actually, every third party has been doing pretty darn good. I guess the only thing they're really looking for is GTA 6. Like, I don't know. I don't know what games were releasing 10 years ago that aren't releasing today, aside from like Grand Theft Auto games, which, yeah, Rockstar doesn't really make games anymore. They iterate on games, but that's okay because there's so many more great games coming out. But that excited me because it was a way that, like, oh, we're actually going to change the way games are. Nintendo, it can't have that. Nintendo was showing off their loading comparison from Breath of the Wild Switch 1 version and Switch 2 version, and I'm like, yeah, it's faster. I'm supposed to be impressed by this. I've been playing games for the last 5 years that have virtually no loading. When I saw the comparison between Ghost of Tsushima PS4 and Ghost of Tsushima PS5, that was impressive because they had to put in a mode in the pause menu to say, take a little more time so I can read the hints because it loaded so freaking fast. And it loaded a lot more too than Breath of the Wild. Well, I guess it depends on where you are. But they're like going to the Korok Forest. Um, and Ghost of Tsushima, but it depends because if you could load into an open world part of Breath of the Wild, but regardless, like that was impressive. The loading screens virtually being away, and they're still loading. I've been playing Assassin's Creed Shadows, and when you fast travel, there is about 5-6 seconds of loading, so it's not a perfect system, but it's much much better than it was. Loading 6 seconds faster in Breath of the Wild, but it still takes 10 seconds to load in, isn't that much impressive to me. I'm sorry. I've been playing the Series X, which also has incredibly fast loading. It might as well be no loading screens either. I don't play most of my third parties on Xbox. I play most of them on PlayStation, but the first party games that I have played on Xbox also have that ridiculously fast loading. Um, and then things like the controller too, where, and I think Xbox is going to very soon do what PlayStation did with the adaptive triggers and with the just the different features that they have in the controller. I mean, the touchpad is the touchpad. Uh, I think it's just a big select button. But the big feature on the Switch is the chat button, which is weird. It's like their big selling point this time is game chat. And I'm not just saying that because they when you put a button on your console, you're telling people this is important. This is important to us. When 1/10 of your showcase for your new console is talking about game chat, and I'm being generous with that 1/10, it might be like 1/6. I don't know if they spent 10-15 minutes on it. But when you're dedicating that much time to this one feature on your console, you're saying this is our selling point. You can game chat on here now. That's we got Discord, mate. Yeah, it's nice, it's convenient. It's not going to make people rush out and spend $500. In fact, it's going to make, if anything, it's going to make parents a little more cautious and anxious because they'd be like, well, who can my kids game chat with? And it's Nintendo, so I'm sure there's going to be very strict systems and it's going to be friends only and things like that. But it is going to be something that parents will ask about for sure. If I was a parent, I'd ask about it. I'd be like, okay, they can just press the C button and talk. We all remember Uno on 360. Well, actually, a lot of us don't because if you were born in 2000 and you didn't play older games like I played, which I wasn't born in 2000, I was born in the 90s, but if you were born at that time and all you played growing up was like Minecraft and Call of Duty, and even then that's kind of like pushing 12, 13, 14, and you didn't have those peripherals or you didn't check out the smaller games, the Xbox arcade games and stuff like that, you might not know what went on with those Xbox cameras back in the day. And you'll hear online people are making jokes about it already, but it is a legitimate thing of like, okay, how are these going to be monitored? You're putting a dedicated button on here. Is it going to be as easy as pushing it and you start chat? Because as a consumer, I would hope it's super easy. I want it to be, I push the button, I'm in. I don't want it to be this whole push the button, invite people, verify people. I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. It's Nintendo, so I'm sure it's going to be obtuse and complicated because they have to make everything obtuse and complicated. Um, but yeah, I do want to mention another positive because I feel like I'm being really negative on it. But again, I'm just sharing my thoughts and I'm sharing what I think a lot of people feel. And it's so, the problem is the internet is so matter of fact. It's so absolute. It's like it either has to be the best direct ever, which I've seen many, many people say that. Many. Best direct ever. That was an amazing reveal. People need to stop complaining about the price. You're wasting this amazing Nintendo Direct. Guys, we saw Donkey Kong. That was about the only big reveal that we saw. We knew about Mario Kart. I'm not going to get excited about Cyberpunk or Yakuza 0 being ported to the Switch too. I love Yakuza 0. It's one of my favorite games of all time. My top 3 most played games on PlayStation, Yakuza 0 is number 2, I think. I've been playing a lot of Rebirth, so it's either number 2 or number 3. I freaking love that game. I'm not gonna go and buy. If I was a normal person, I'm not a normal person. I'll buy any console, obviously, covered in handhelds, and I have 3 PS5s for God's sake. Um, but if I was a normal person, and actually one of my friends who was watching it with me, she's almost beaten Yakuza 0, and she's like, "That's not so." I love it, but you got to do more than that for me. Um, and again, I keep losing my train of thought. My apologies, because there's just a lot of things processing. But there's been many more directs, much better than that. Infamously, the Smash Brothers direct was so good. I think that's when they also revealed Metroid 4, and they talked about some other things. The lead up to the Switch launching was so hype. It was so good with the directs, and it was so good with the game reveals that we didn't really care about the story. I mean, we cared, but it was like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of things that suck about the Switch, but I'll give it the benefit of the doubt because it's a new concept. And are you seeing these games coming out to it? Are you seeing Breath of the Wild? Even some interesting one like Snipper Clips. It's like it's at least interesting and different. Uh, for the Switch 2, you get Mario Kart, which is cool. We've been waiting 10 years. It's Mario Kart. And I think Mario Kart 8 is kind of an anomaly too because I and again, Nintendo's not stupid, but also Nintendo's not smart. We saw what they did with the Wii U. I think a lot of those sales are inflated with bundles. A lot of those sales are inflated with bundles, which maybe I like that's their philosophy here is like they'll just bundle it with the console and everyone will buy the Mario Kart bundle because they want it. I don't know. Um, but getting to my last point, kind of wrapping up here. Uh, I do like the game sharing thing. I think that is really cool. Um, I think it'll be really cool if it is utilized well. And it is also a feature that Nintendo, and they do this a lot too, they had, and then they just randomly got rid of, and now they're bringing it back. On the DS and I think even 3DS, there were games that could game share, uh, but then they just kind of got rid of it. So having that feature there is really cool. Um, but it was a very limited. I mean, one of the games they were showing off was like 48 and 1 or some crap. Uh, you're gonna have to make sure that like this system, this program is actually utilized and expanded to a lot of games. Will it be? I don't know. And you're not gonna see Mario Kart game shared. I can tell you that because they want you to go out and buy a copy each of all that. At least let me look that up really quick. Um, Game share Nintendo Switch 2. So, the games that are announced for game share. Mario Party Jamboree, which makes sense because you would only need one copy anyways if you were playing with people. Mario Kart Jamboree is a game where people usually just get around one console or one TV and play. So I guess it's just more convenient that you can play in handheld instead of finding a TV. Uh, Super Mario 3D World, which again is a local co-op game. So it's kind of a convenience thing, I guess, if there's not a TV. We have Clubhouse, 51 games, Mario Party Jamboree, Big Brain Academy, Super Mario World, Mario Odyssey, Captain. Okay, and you know what? Actually, I'm seeing this too. You can share them online, so that is kind of cool. Um, that is cool. So you don't have to be in the same room. Um, but that only works with 3D World, Mario Odyssey, Captain Toad, Clubhouse games and Big Brain. Mario Party Jamboree you cannot play online, so it's only local, which you would already be playing together on one console local anyways. So I don't know. And there's only 6 games, so you're gonna have to do more than that. You can't just let this thing die off. So there are a lot of my thoughts on the Switch too. I know a lot of them probably sound negative. I was trying to be very objective. I think that's the right word. Just looking at the facts, seeing what's happening, giving my perspective as someone who's been really ear to the ground on the industry for over a decade now. I mean, I'm not a journalist or anything like that, but I'm definitely like a video game news consumer. A lot of podcasts, a lot of articles, a lot of research, just different developers, different companies. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just trying to say that I'm kind of obsessed with this industry. And yeah, some of the things Nintendo Switch 2 is doing are expected, but none of it's really. The only thing that was like, oh, that's cool, is the mouse feature. And again, that's going to be a feature that is this actually implemented? It could just be another IR sensor where it's there for a couple games and then you forget it exists. How many FPSs do people really play on the Switch? Not a lot. Doom, we have Metroid coming out. Call of Duty might get ported now that Microsoft owns it. Microsoft and Nintendo are kind of buddy. But there's not a lot. So, and you know, there were showing those like RTS games and stuff like that too. But we'll just see. We'll see. Because I feel like anyone who wants to use mouse controls on RTS isn't going to get it on the Switch too. They already have it on PC. But we'll see. Last thing I want to do, and then we'll wrap this up. And I kind of alluded to this at the beginning, but I'm going to show it now. I'm going to talk about it now. I'm going to tell you why the Switch 2 is equivalent to the PlayStation 3. Switch 2 has 256 gigabytes of storage at $450. The PlayStation 3 Super Slim, 500 gigabytes at $300. The Switch 2 has Game Chat integrated. So does PS3. You can make a party right away. The Switch 2 has 2 USB-C ports. Now, USB-C didn't exist when the PlayStation 3 came out, but the PlayStation 3 does have at least 2 USB ports, maybe 3. Maybe 3. Switch 2 has a built-in Ethernet port. So does the Switch, or so does the PS3. The Switch 2 can play up to 4K. The PlayStation 3 cannot, so there's point Switch 2. So far it's been tied. Point Switch 2, 4K. PlayStation 3 couldn't do that. Again, 4K, it might have existed. It was not popular. It was very, very expensive. So there's that. And the last thing, Switch 2, it's a hybrid. Play it on docked or play it handheld mode. And to that, I say, I was there. All right? I was there. And this came out at $250. So you get a console with a game bundled for the Switch 2, $500 USD. You get a PS3 console with a game bundled and the PlayStation Vita, $550 USD. $50 more dollars 13 years ago. And you essentially have the Switch 2. I thought it was a funny comparison. Obviously, the Switch 2 is probably more powerful than a PS3. Probably. I would not confidently say that a Switch 1 is more powerful than a PS3. Honestly, I probably wouldn't say that it is more powerful. I don't know. It would be close. I think a Switch 1 and a PlayStation 3 would be close in power technology. Technology, that's a weird way of saying that. It'd be close in power. But the Switch 2, I'm sure, is more like a PS4. I saw people saying that the Switch 2 is as powerful as a PlayStation 5. Have a seat. You need to calm down. I would be surprised if a Switch 2 was as powerful as a PS4 Pro or an Xbox One X. That's how underpowered Nintendo consoles have always been. And we'll see if it works out, because a lot of people say, a lot of either fanboys or a lot of just uninformed people who don't know gaming history and don't know how Nintendo has fared, because all you're hearing, I shouldn't say all you're hearing, but a lot you're hearing is, well, Nintendo's only failed twice, the Virtual Boy and the Wii U. That's the only time they failed. I adamantly argue that the Nintendo 64 was a failure, that the GameCube was a failure, that the Wii U was a failure, that the new 3DS, and I stand by that, but they called it, it had its exclusives. It had exclusives, so it was its own console, and I have two of them. That was a failure, and the Virtual Boy was a failure. So failure with Nintendo is not uncommon, and it's not just Nintendo either. A lot of these gaming companies fail. Sony has failed. Sony has failed. They have before. Okay? Xbox has failed before. So acting like Nintendo never fails and that Switch 2 is a surefire thing and a home run. That's what people said about the Wii U too. And when you're not offering up much new things, when you're not showing value for your dollar, when your technology isn't new and cool anymore, because the Switch was new and cool, first hybrid console. Switch 2 was just a Switch 1. We have Mario Kart 8 at home that has much more tracks. No, it's not open world, but it's also not $40 or $80. So it's going to be a hard sell, with or without these tariff things happening. I think that would have been a hard sell. You want a similar gaming experience, go buy a PlayStation 3 Ultra Slim and a PlayStation Vita and a PlayStation Eye, and you will have a comparable experience to the Switch 2. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all of you. If you watched this far, you must like this show. This podcast usually has a lot of more people in it, but today it was only me. Hopefully next time we can get a couple more voices on here and we can discuss more in depth about just a lot of things that are happening in the industry. Definitely more Nintendo news, but also just other things. So subscribe if you'd like to see that. Share, like, all that jazz that people say in YouTube videos, but I don't like to advertise because I'm just here for fun. Yeah, and, be nice in the comments. I like Nintendo, I swear. I like, look, you can, I like Nintendo, okay? I support them. But I'm also not an idiot. Or I shouldn't say an idiot. I'm not a fanboy. I'm also not a fanboy. I call it as it is. I call the Switch as it is. Is the Vita better than the Switch? Tune in next time to find out my opinion. Yes. Thank you so much. Goodbye.